love good stories. Like I
Hmm.
love stories that have a good character arc and a resolve, and you know, I'm fine with a good redemption arc, but it can't be cheesy. I just it so a good story that's a good happy ending story. I love it. I love it. And
Yes.
um so so, you know, I think Marvel has done mostly a very good job, right? I think we could criticize certain things here and there, but there's there's
Absolutely.
there, there's often real sacrifice involved, and real tension between even the characters who are the heroes. So my favorite Marvel movies have been Black Panther, one, um,
Hmm.
Doctor Strange, right? Because there he
Ah.
because both T'Challa and Doctor Strange are people who learn how to sacrifice, and they're like, I'm willing to lose. And
Hmm.
so when T'Challa is in the realm of the ancestors and confronts his father and all his ancestors and says, "You're all wrong," I was like,
Boy, if I had the chance.
I know. It was just so good. So,
Yeah, man.
and same with Lord of the Rings. It's like, no, we're gonna do what's right and what's good, even if we don't know that this is gonna defeat Sauron, right? Like
Ooh.
they don't know. They actually don't. So
Right.
that's stronger in the books than even stronger in the books than in the movies. And it's
Yeah.
just so gut-wrenchingly good. So I think there's just something probably in all of us, maybe because we serve a God who made us to eh, desire a story where good triumphs over evil somehow, right? I
Mm.
mean, it can be
Hope.
complicated, but
Like, it's got to have some hope, right?
yes, exactly.
Otherwise, you're just delving into someone else's misery, and if you do that long enough, you're bound to get caught in that. I like, you know what? Let me pause for just a second. Let's go ahead and actually start the show. This is good.
Yep.
All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome back to Urban Academia. I'm your host, Jay Zilla, as per usual. Today with me, I have none other than the great. Look, you can't don't start getting humble on me now. I can see the wheels turning, right? The humility starting to bubble up a little bit. The great Mako Nagasawa. He is the author of Abortion Policy and Christian Social Ethics in the United States, as well as the director. Oh, here's that name. Don't tell me. Don't tell me. The director of the Anastasis.
Oh,
Well,
you're almost there. Anastasis.
Anastasis. Anastasis. By the end of the show, I will get that. How are you, sir? Tell the people a little bit about yourself.
I'm good, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on. And I'm just a little afraid of setting high expectations. So I I live in Boston. Um I've been here since 1999 when I married my wife, Ming. We have two kids and a foster daughter. So and we live in Christian Intentional Community in Dorchester. Had some fabulous connections and friendships in the Black church community that
Hmm.
we became part of here. Before that, I was raised in California, Los Angeles for 18 years, and then the Bay Area for about 9 years. I went to
Oh,
Stanford,
wow.
did my undergrad there. At one point, I thought I might become a public high school teacher. Life took a different direction. Um, I did work at Intel for 5 years or 6 years, right,
Mhm.
6 years, while I lived in a Mexican immigrant community called East Palo Alto while I was being mentored by a couple. And and then my wife and I met long distance on a blind date, and then we a year later got married. I moved out to here in Boston. So that's a little bit of me.
Oh man, that answers the question: how does anyone immigrate into Boston?
Oh yeah,
It's a lady. It's either a job, the universities, which are very good, or a lady.
it's
Okay,
love.
so
That's right.
it's love. And the cheesesteaks, right? Like, okay. Side note: how good are the
Uh,
cheesesteaks?
well, I mean, I mean,
Uh
Philly is
oh. Uh
definitely the home
oh.
of the cheesesteaks, but Boston, the hmm, it, it's not the native Boston food that's great. I mean,
Right.
sure, clam chowder, like lobster, seafood, that is good. And
Oh
Boston has
wait.
become more of a foodie city. So, but I think that's more of a recent thing.
You know what? I love you covering for me, but I totally, in my mind, heard Philadelphia because I am hungry.
Oh,
There's a gas station close to here that
I
sells you
understand.
like makeshift Philly cheesesteaks, and I completely just put that on you. Paula, listen, all you Bostonians out there, the clam chowder. The, I know. My apologies. That was a Philly thing, but I'm sure your cheesesteaks are pretty good. But I appreciate you for you just went with it.
Hey,
I love it.
you know, right. Boston
So
has fun, a diversity of places, and
mhm.
so one of the restaurants, it was opened by, I think, a Caribbean couple,
Ooh.
Afro-Caribbean. It's called, oh, see, I'm 51 and my memory's going. Um, Comfort Kitchen, and it was named as one of the top 50 new restaurants in the U.S.
Oh,
So
wow.
that is good. They do some really uh, tasty food. So
I'm
y'all
thinking
come
Caribbean,
out this way.
is that like jerk chicken, oxtails and stuff?
Yes, yes.
Oh, man, that sounds good.
Hmm.
Alright, so you're reaching a deep, deep love of mine. Like, I feel like I'm a foodie, and this is why I work so hard because I'm trying to be able to afford me, being able to explore around the world, you know? You ever
Hmm.
see those, videos, especially on YouTube, that are
Yeah,
like, "What do you do for a living?" "Oh, I just travel around the world tasting delicious foods and record it." I'm in the wrong business.
I
I'm
know. I know.
in
How
I'm
do I
in
do
the
that?
wrong business. Right, right. So tell us a little bit about your book, and I want to hold back as much as possible because I'm trying to get. Wait, okay, I gotta tell the audience a secret. Don't listen, okay? I'm trying to get him to come back on the other show for a book club, and once I finish reading the book, which I have started, and so far it is brilliant, I'm gonna try to lure him back to have a long form discussion about the book specifically. Okay. All right, I'm back. I'm back. I had to, step away and talk to the audience real quick. But tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, I think yeah, it's obviously controversial in some ways. I think other people look at the title and it's like, I know what you're gonna say. You're a
Yeah.
man. You're a Christian. I know what you're gonna say, and I want to say you don't like the more I got into this topic over the course of years, the more
Mhm.
I realized actually, most Christians today aren't really telling the truth about what does the Bible say? What do we know and what do we not know, right? And then how did the early church engage with science? Because they did. They made science their friend, as opposed to, I don't know, Catholics and Protestants in the U.S. over the last 150 years
Mhm.
have felt like science is an enemy. And when you do that, they started to use abortion as a weapon to try to ignore science, right? To ignore
Wow.
embryology. And what do we know about early fetal development? So all of that just goes out the window. And then and then politically, there's just been two movements. I appreciate the earlier movement as opposed to the later. The earlier
Mhm.
movement was Catholics in the 1930s, who they were pro-life before Protestants. At the time, Protestants didn't care. Actually, at the time, Protestants were more for eugenics, but that's topic for another conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
Catholics saw the abortion rate go up during the Great Depression because poverty, of course, right? Like,
Mhm.
you don't bring kids into the world if you don't have hope. So
Right.
so Catholics sided with FDR. They got behind the New Deal. They believed that the federal government should exercise more governance over the states, even though everyone screamed states' rights. But the,
Right.
um, they were pro-labor, anti-poverty, democracy of small businesses. Let's try to expand some civil rights, make housing more affordable, at least to some people. It was not perfect, and it
Hmm.
should have expanded it to black folks way earlier. So, but the beginnings were laid, right? Like
Right.
the idea was, all right, let's have a pro woman pro-natal policy that makes child raising affordable, and then maybe the abortion rate will come down, and it did. So that was the first approach. But the second approach was by white evangelicals, starting with Ronald Reagan. And
Yeah.
they jumped onto Ronald Reagan's platform because he brought together a coalition of anti-communists, right? So he wanted
Hmm.
to fight the Soviets abroad, so big military spending, anti-communist. He wanted to dismantle the New Deal, right? He didn't want
Oh
to
wow.
like help other people raise their kids. So he wanted to help the rich. So he called that communism, and people believed him. And then he brought in like the Southern Christian segregationists who were used to be Democrat, right? Because those guys voted for Jimmy Carter just in the previous election.
Right.
So Reagan said, "No, it was called the Southern Strategy," and he said, "Let's make abortion a wedge issue." And the rhetoric was, "Why do people get abortions? It's because they're not trusting God. So they're atheist.
Mm.
Never mind, right? That 60 to 70% of all women who procured abortions were Protestants or Catholics. Okay, they're atheists. And who mobilizes the atheists? It's the communists. So then the anti-abortion kind of movement was brought into into the service of not a social welfare paradigm, but a
Hmm.
neoliberal capitalist paradigm where you get what you deserve, and so to speak. And
Right.
it's just the idea that, look, if you now, like, we don't want to support your kid, right? So if you have sex before you should and you have a baby before you're ready, too bad,
Hmm.
right? It's on you. You should become a parent. That's what you deserve. And if you
Right.
have economic hardship because of it, that's on you. So and then of course they connected it to like a larger criminal justice
Right.
paradigm of like that's also related to what you deserve. So, so to speak. So so once the anti-abortion kind of movement served capitalism as opposed to what it was in a social welfare paradigm, things got even worse. So those are the reasons why I wanted to write the book.
Man.
Because the more research I did, the more I was like, oh, this is really complicated, but it needs to be told, this story.
So you said a lot there. How much of this? Because towards the beginning of the book, you talk about. Oh man, I'm not going to try to guess the date, but basically where they declare the Pope. Um, was it
Infallible.
infallible? Infallible, right?
Right,
So
right.
what does it do to sort of take the divine out of it and make a person sort of a divine figure? And how does that, later on, because I feel like it was what 1900s, right? 19th century, where they're making this case that the Pope is infallible, and how does that kind of seep into our ideology at present?
Yeah, that was 1870, and then that's important because the Catholic Church changed its opinion about the fetus and early abortion in 1869, just the year before that. So for over 1,500 years at least, the Catholic Church believed in what was called quickening. And quickening was when mom felt the baby kick in the womb. And
Mm,
that was thought to be when God ensouls the infant, like breathes a soul into the fetus, and the fetus then becomes not just a part of mom's body or tissues, but but a living baby,
Right.
which deserves to be recognized as a full person, full human personhood. So I just want to make clear, no, the fetus is human life, but human personhood is a different category. It's a more specific thing, and
Oh,
that also becomes important, by the way, in end of life care, not just in beginning of life care, because when you're technically brain dead and have no brain waves, you could keep like a person's organs alive, so
right.
that is human life. But is it personhood? No, we technically say the person is legally and medically dead. So
Mm,
we do have to differentiate between human life and human personhood, because, well, the Bible does it too, but also it's important and practical to do so. So anyway, the two dates of 1869 and 1870 are just important to uh, understand, because they're part of, in some ways, a "we're afraid of science" mood on the part of the Catholic Church. So what was going on around that time? Well, Darwin's theories,
ah,
um, but also there was a growing movement starting in Germany that was about the Bible, that said we could read the Bible scientifically, like we could deconstruct it, we could rip it apart, we could find out where this piece came from. Um, the Pentateuch, or the Torah, the five books of Moses, weren't really written by Moses. They were a political compromise by different schools of thought in Israel. So, and they
oh
put it
wow.
together to kind of keep themselves together. Yeah. So they thought it was like the U.S. Constitution, right? It's like, oh well, here's free states, slave states.
Hmm.
It was a political compromise to stitch people who didn't agree together, and so that's what they were starting to say, and that would have later ramifications. It would be used against the Jewish community in World War II, right? So
Ah, I
because
see.
it kind of goes along with, let's make the Jewish community look stupid. So,
Right.
but Catholics and Protestants were also nervous about this, because it took the interpretation of the Bible out of their hands,
Hmm.
um, and into so-called experts, literary experts, so on.
Right.
So that was part of what they're responding to, and people recognize nowadays that, yeah, when you say, well, the Pope is infallible, and later in the early 1900s, the Protestant fundamentalists wrote the
Hmm.
fundamentals to say, well, the Bible's infallible. It was because um, they were nervous about, like, how do we answer people when they say, how do we know things? Like,
Right.
how do we know confidently that this is what our faith really says?
Right.
So it was like, well, science seems to give some, at least, process, so that we can
Hmm.
know things with confidence. And so the church felt like, well, we need to express why it is we know things about our faith, including, you know, our position on abortion, or our position on the fetus. And yeah, so they didn't actually use the Bible, unfortunately. They used philosophy that could float over and around the Bible. And so their reason was the moral probability reason, which is, well, we don't know exactly when God ensouls the infant, but just in case it's at fertilization, we'll go with that, right? It's the moral probability that
Yeah.
if there is any probability that God does that, then we should take that seriously morally, and therefore we're going to oppose abortion.
It sounds like Geico for the spirit, right? Some spiritual insurance.
A little bit,
I'm not sure, but just in case, we'll do
just
it
in
this
case.
way.
Yeah.
How does anti-abortion serve capitalism? I thought that was an interesting point you made earlier. What's the connection there?
Well, it's primarily a political realignment. So this uh, gets at how Reagan won Southerners, white Southerners, into the Republican Party, and it's part of the Southern strategy. So um, abortion serves anti-communist ideas and pro-capitalist ideas in the sense that um, Reagan said, "Well, you shouldn't have to help pay for someone else's kid, right?" Like
Mm,
actually, Senator Ron Johnson, I think from Wyoming, said
right.
recently, "Yeah, why should I help with someone else's children?" Um, Even though we do that all the time, but you know, public schooling. Uh, so
Public facilities, like
public
play
facility.
areas or learning centers and things like that, developmental centers.
That's right.
Yeah,
Like it's actually a good idea to invest in everyone's kids.
right.
And Jesus welcomed all kids and he said, "You're all my kids." And because God in the Old Testament to Israel, especially at the Jubilee in Leviticus 25 said, "You're all
Oh,
my
yeah.
kids." But, you know, in America, if you're racist and you don't want to pay taxes, then you don't want to support other people's kids. You don't want to make the investment in other people. Um, Even though you wind up having to pay for them anyway through the criminal justice system, policing, emergency care at hospitals, and a whole bunch of other
Yes.
things. And but that was the rhetoric, right? So Reagan famously talked about the welfare queen. He won people to the idea of states' rights, and abortion kind of sits at that the same place. Like some of the same
Mhm.
rhetoric could be used to approach abortion. Like we shouldn't have to pay for other people's irresponsible choices. Blah blah blah. Even
Right.
though morally and from a Christian standpoint, like, do kids choose their parents?
Right.
Right? Like, no. So what do the kids
Unfortunately, because my mother would be Winfrey, Oprah Winfrey.
Right, exactly.
Temporary, mom, I love you. You just don't
Right,
have it like Oprah.
right. So
Yeah.
so what the question we need to ask is why why do we make kids pay for all of the things that their parents can pass down to them, whether it be advantages or disadvantages? Like, what have the kids
Mhm.
done to deserve any of that? Nothing.
Right.
And so, um, but it made sense for Reagan to be so pro-capitalist that abortion became part of kind of a vision of the family where each family is independent and just takes care of itself, which really means you don't have to take care of other people's families.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that notion that Dr. King towards the end there was coming more and more, I guess what could be labeled as radical, right? But
That's
his
right.
huge radical thing was, you're telling these people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but I mean, it's cruel to tell a bootless man to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? So he started talking
That's right.
about, the civil rights unfortunately didn't cost anything. It didn't
Right.
cost anything to say, okay, fine, you're human, right?
Right.
We'll give you some resources and count you in the census and all this stuff. It didn't cost America anything, but the economic changes that he was asking for of all races, right?
That's right.
Um, was that's where he started to be deemed dangerous by the government, his own government, which is always a tragedy. But
Yep.
yeah, I like the idea that you were saying is what I've heard before, which is people aren't pro life, they're just anti abortion, if that makes
That's right.
sense.
That's right.
Right? Because what's the to the degree that you care about another person? It's like, oh, they deserve rights, they deserve to live, they deserve liberty and the chance, and they're born. Okay, now go live in your corner and be hungry and be, surrounded by crime and
Right.
build your value system based off of that, your environment, and then somehow overcome that and become a lawyer. It's
Right.
just I don't know. Like, are people malicious in that or ignorant in your opinion?
Um, well, there's in fairness, there's a range.
There's a
So
range. Okay.
there's ignorance, and then there's willful ignorance.
Yeah.
Uh, so I so I don't know, but in general, I think there's uh, um, we need to keep. we need to keep saying all these things, right? As Dr. King
Right.
said, like, well, wait a minute. Now, white government gave away land in the West to white families. Uh, they had the post office to serve all those people so they could keep in touch with all the people back east that they were leaving behind. Not only
Mhm.
that, but white government fought Native Americans so they can take that land, right? I mean, there's
Right.
all of the Homestead Acts, and there's all, and
Mhm.
then during the New Deal, uh, the unfortunately, the New Deal and the GI Bill, FHA only gave, really housing benefits or, mortgage coverage to white families. Um,
Mm.
and so it's always been about big government. And let's not
Wow.
even get started about, like, all the money that the government gives to, corporations that are in the defense business, the electronics business, the,
Mhm.
uh, roads and infrastructure business,
Right.
most of which were white. So it's
Yeah.
just
It really is, and I love your term of mental jujitsu, right?
yeah,
Because you talk about like if you hear, like an AOC saying, "Oh, tax the rich," and then someone like a Ben Shapiro goes, "Oh, she's an idiot." I'm sorry, I shouldn't make voices, right? There's nothing wrong with that man's voices. We just disagree on some fundamental things. Okay, there's my, the Christian bubbling up in me. Like, be nice, right? But he'll come behind a statement like that, tax the rich, and he'll call her an idiot. And, 90 around 90% of the rich account for all of the taxes, right? And which mathematically is true, but he does a good job of not telling like the whole scope,
right.
which are corporate taxes almost don't exist anymore,
Yes,
and they're
yes,
still they're still taxing us from our resources, our power, the environment, right? The poverty that gets
right.
sort
That's
of
right.
activated. Like it's a lot. You need to tell the whole story. How do we tell people confidently and competently the whole story, so to speak? Like, how do I get
Yes,
someone who says, "Oh, I care about babies and you shouldn't be killing babies," and that's that. Like, how do I get them to then cross over? Okay, I'm going all over the place. Here it is. How do I get them to care about the fetus once it has developed fully and is born all the way through, uh, you know, 70s, 80s, or even before that with the retirement age and benefits for senior citizens and resources, and then also how do I get those people to on board with, well, if you want to drive down those abortion numbers,
right,
here's how we could do it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of it is to insist that we at least understand the facts, right? So, what percentage of women get abortions who are already married? At least
Hmm.
16%. Now that's not the biggest, obviously that's not the hugest percentage, but it's
Hmm.
still really substantial, right? So why would married women get abortions? It's because of economics. And also
Hmm.
because parenting is just hard. It's hard. So, if we were so okay there, like if we want to bring down the abortion rate, why don't we do what like the Scandinavian countries do and pay for childcare? Let's have government subsidies. Yes, tax the
Oh
rich
man.
um, and help out with childcare. That produces a pronatal policy. Another dynamic is, um, well, if you want to care about people from uh, from all the way from womb to tomb, as they say,
Hmm.
is uh, have a bit of a bigger perspective on health and fairness. So, what changes do people make to their lives when they know like their health is at stake? Like the COVID
Right.
pandemic. I mean,
Right.
we started using our housing policy as part of our health uh, plan, right? Like our public health plan. The problem is, does everyone have housing? Can you stay at home? Like, I mean, not everyone can. So what do we
Right.
do about that? Because that impacts disease, and so and we have kind of free marketed ourselves into a housing crisis. So so we have to think about, like, gosh, how do we? kind of help invest in people
Hmm.
and design systems so that the things that we say are really important. They're really important for family life. They're really important to get a job, right? You can't get a job if you don't have an address. So,
Right.
which comes first? So, right, like, do you a home or a job? Well, it see, and that's when people get all mixed up. Or health, like, why don't we have the public option? Because what come does health is health a requirement to work, or is work a requirement to get health care? I think it's that health is a requirement for
You
work.
just blew my mind. Like, what few brain cells I had left was just they're done. How does that
You
even
know,
work? Like, which one? Because it's almost like the chicken or the egg, right? Or
right.
the snake
Just
eating its own tail.
right. And so we can say things like, look, it'd be easier to start a small business if you didn't have to pay for your employees' health care. So let's I don't mean to say that's the only reason we should think that way, but it is appealing to kind of the pro-business type of person. Um, but look, again, women are vulnerable because they tend to be underemployed. They tend to, have to care for the elders in their family or do the
Mhm.
child care. So they're more likely to not have adequate health insurance and not have adequate contraceptive care. So people say that, oh, we want to bring down the abortion rate. Actually,
Yeah.
unfortunately, there are some Christians who don't say that. Unfortunately, there are some Christians who say, because I've asked them, would you rather have a low abortion rate, but like high contraceptive care, even though, yeah, there's some premarital sex happening, right? Like,
Right.
or would you rather have um, a high abortion rate with no contraceptive care, no like social supports? And what would you choose? And they
And
would say,
premarital sex is still
and,
happening.
and yeah, and it's still happening, but at least abortion is against the law. And
Yeah.
they say, I would rather have it against the law because they believe in the Christian nationalist myth that God judges nations, not just individuals. And so we have to put the right laws in place. And then, boy, I've done my part and it's on you, right?
Yeah.
It's your fault if you have an abortion. So, I mean, uh, that that type of person I would have to reason with in a different way. But to the
Right.
extent that we share a common goal of bringing down the abortion rate, then yeah, I mean, there's all these things that we can agree on.
Mhm. Yeah, that's incredible. One of the, I mean, going along the lines of premarital sex, there is the part in your book. You could tell I've definitely cracked open the front half of the book when you talk about how people were sort of against the mass production of automobiles because that's another place that teens can have sex in,
Oh yeah.
like that blew my mind. Like as a way of some type of contraception, we can't have a bunch of cars flying around here because they're gonna
They'll
use
lead to
them to
sex.
do it. Right.
Right,
They're gonna
right.
drive to places and have sex. They're gonna have sex in the car. Like it's like, wait a minute now. Like, it's incredible. Just there's no limit to um just people latching on to ideology and saying like and taking it for fact, I guess is a
That's
way of
right.
saying it.
Mhm,
What are
mhm.
the other percentages? You talked about 16% married couples.
Yeah.
What are you saying to the people that are like, well, yeah, but 15% of them are to avoid consequences, right? It's the cheating husband or the cheating wife. Like, what are you saying to that crowd?
Well, I think I I mean, I'm sure I don't know that the percentages matter at that point because but
Yeah.
if you just want because if you want to punish people, then then you have to ask the question, okay, but what battle are you really wanting to prioritize? Right?
Mm,
Do you want to bring down the abortion rate, or do you really want to make it hard for people if they have premarital sex and if they have a kid before they're ready? Like you you got to answer that question. And the I'm just firmly in the camp of we should bring down the abortion rate.
Mhm.
Uh, Also because uh, I I'm going to say this a little more strongly than I actually mean it, but let's just say that our capitalist system is so dehumanizing that sometimes the things that people do in order to feel human
Mhm.
is to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. I mean, especially if like you're a poor woman, how do you afford rent in these days, right? Like,
Mhm.
well, you probably find a boyfriend and live with that boyfriend, but then you're vulnerable. And in general, it's
Mhm.
just more expensive to be a woman so than it is to be a man. And so there was a study done by NBER, National Bureau of Economic Research, that showed that when jobs left the Midwest, men proposed to their girlfriends at lower rates. Why? Because they're less confident, right?
Oh,
So
man.
yeah, don't we want people to get married? Yeah. See, and economics has something to do with it, and
Mhm.
and so let's just say that people are going to have sex anyway. The only thing that we can really um, influence through our policies is whether they get married. Think about
Gotcha.
it, right? Think about it that way, and your perspective totally changes. So then, look, why not go for the 4-day work week so that people actually have time to date, like to actually know themselves
Right.
and to be invested in their communities. They don't live siloed lives. Like they
Mhm.
actually can be part of one another's lives. Wouldn't that lead to healthier relationships? I think so. Right. So um uh, we uh, what do we think is humanizing? And I
Right.
know, like, but I'm not making excuses for people, right? I am a Christian. I'm a leader at my church. I hope people come to Jesus. I hope they make faithful choices with their bodies and
Mhm.
have sexual integrity. But I don't expect non-Christians to uphold a Christian sexual ethic, and I don't expect that uh, capitalism or like the fear of having a hard economic life is
Mhm.
actually going to be persuasive enough to stop people from getting together. In
Right.
fact, I think the opposite. I think our system is so isolating and dehumanizing and expensive that that we are forcing people to make choices about their bodies and their sex lives that actually are detrimental to them. The
Mhm.
policies that we should support, it's just better to think about it the other way. Can we encourage more people to make wise choices, to actually get married, to have their children within wedlock, right? And then because then you look at the all the other statistics about women who procure abortions or families and couples who procure abortions, and it
Mhm.
starts to make sense, right? Like the average woman who procures an abortion is in her late 20s, already has a child, and is trying to make it economically.
Mhm.
So that's really significant. The average woman is white, right, getting an abortion, so
Right.
that changes things uh, for some people, unfortunately. So
Unfortunately.
like, and then the top 2 or 3 reasons for, why do women get abortions? What they report is number one, can't afford it. Number two, my partner's unreliable. I'm not sure that actually I want this kid to have him as a partner, as a dad, right? Like, ooh, that's really serious. So,
Yeah.
from the standpoint of like what's happening with men today, like, yeah, absolutely. So then we have to start thinking about that too,
Right.
both in the church and just in society. How much social media is out there? How much is porn out there? How much do men feel known? How do they have a mentor? So uh, all of those things play into whether a man is going to be a reliable father, right? And
Right.
therefore someone that a woman would want to have as their child's father, right? Like that they want to marry. All these things matter.
That's a long list, and I'm sure that's just the top, the tippy top of the iceberg. I love how so many of your videos. I'm speaking again with author Mako Nagasawa, also the director of Anastasis.
Anastasis.
Anastasis. What is this? Anastasis. Like I see it, but okay.
I know it's tough.
Anastasis.
It's tough.
Director of the Anastasis Center. I'm gonna put this up so the rest of the audience can struggle along with me. So I look at your website, right? You being the director of it, I'm saying your, but I know many people go into making this a possibility.
I have a great
Looking
team.
at the website here, right, and as I'm just kind of scrolling through, I mean, I could spend all day on this, right? Got a couple of highlighted videos there, right? Wonderful quote, but I want to get down to this section down here. Holy cow, right? Like some of these words I had to look up, and like all of it looks very, very interesting to look into. Like
Mm,
some of these themes: Christian white supremacy, women in the church leadership, Bible supernatural designs,
hmm.
like all of these tools. And then down here you have your hot topics, right?
Yeah.
Proof of the Bible, race, sex, just all of these things to explore. How did how did y'all get this thing started? And I guess what went into creating this center? And is there a physical location or is it all digital based?
It is digital, and so
Uh-huh.
there's a small team that I lead, and they are wonderful. They live in different places in the U.S., and then
Mhm.
we try to connect with a network of pastors, lay leaders, even seminary professors who enjoy using our material. So the idea is that the basic idea is that in the early church they focused on God's restorative justice. They did not think that God's justice was retributive. Again, like there is real accountability for people. Our choices matter, but it's in a
Mhm.
restorative justice paradigm where if God calls the offender or those who have done harm to participate in the undoing of that harm. And in a
Mhm.
Christian sense, that is why God had in Israel, right, to be a medical focus group that would try to restore human nature to the best that they can. He's a doctor. He has a pretty demanding health regimen, and
Mhm.
and he's like, give this a try, you'll get better. And they did, and but not perfectly. But Israel did what we Gentiles would not, and Israel and Jesus, excuse me, Jesus did what Israel could not, meaning he actually lived the health regimen, and he actually worked the health back into his human nature and put God's love into every cell in his body so that he could
Mhm.
share himself by his spirit with us and do the same in us, so that basically he is victorious over human evil, first in him, in his own humanity, and then in us. And so that means that it's really easy to do evangelism and social justice together in the same breath, because Jesus is
Wow.
healing the problem of human evil. And this is the only way that you can have a God who is 100% good, who can who can give us a happy ending story where good triumphs over evil, but he does not become evil by doing so, right?
Right.
Because he does it as one of us, and he's always loving us, calling for our partnership. That is the early church. And for different reasons, over church history, we kind of lost sight of that, and we want to bring that back, and we apply it in basic tools in Bible study.
Mhm.
We have devotionals, evangelism tools, displays that start conversation publicly, respectfully, intelligently with people of any belief background, and and also we have study and action guides that focus on Christian ethics responses in a restorative justice paradigm to all kinds of issues like criminal
Mhm.
justice reform or
Yes.
housing or and ecology. food and the environment, and as we've been talking about, even abortion policy. It's 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 challenging, it's demanding, to look into all these things, but it's so rewarding because I feel like this is coherent. It it is the most loving version of the gospel that has ever been, right,
Yeah,
in church history. So those
man,
are
that's
some of the things
amazing.
we do.
I mean, that's a lot. There's a guy I talked to before a couple of weeks ago, by the name of Kyle Robinson, and he went to prison, and he loved saying rightfully so. And when he got out, his father, I believe, was a police officer. So he, told him like for sure, I don't want to go back. I want to turn my life around. All these
Mm,
things. So now he's a creator of Amplified Science, where he goes in and he primarily focuses on people who are in prison wrongfully. But he also helps people who were rightfully so in prison, in order to actually go about the work of rehabilitation, right?
mm,
The recidivism of prisons. I guess if I'm even saying the word right, how often do they get released and then go back in? He's trying to work to get those numbers down, and he's also the co-organizer of the Village of Second Chance. Now, you talked earlier about how Reagan was able to take a bunch of different opposing groups and file them all under possible communists, right? Communism. This is our big fight, right?
that's right.
As you And then later on, you see the culmination of that, where the Black Panther political party is being labeled as more dangerous than Soviet or the USSR, you know, who had nuclear missiles, that they were more dangerous. And if you look at what, of course, they had plenty of mistakes, plenty of things they could have done wrong, better, right? But at the heart of it, feeding the children in the community, putting them to work in the community, people of all races. I mean, I know it's depicted into a film where they have, the Black Panther Party. They go to like this white nationalist meeting, so it's like Ku Klux Klan meeting, and they're sitting in the back, and it's just three of them listening to all this hate, and then they're like, aren't y'all hungry too, right? Aren't y'all being abused by the police system too? Aren't you as broke as we are? Aren't you tired? And somehow gets them to come along, and then like a Mexican gang, like literally bringing them all together, and them being able to be labeled communists and then terrorists, and then finally disbanded and broken up to the point where they're still trying to put the pieces back together.
Right. Wasn't
Um,
that the Fred Hampton story?
yeah,
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 Black
yeah.
Messiah. Yeah.
Black Messiah. Thank you, Judas and the Black Messiah. Which, side note, Judas doesn't have any writings out there. He's got nothing, no sort of insight as to like why. Because I know I've reread the text fairly recently, so correct me where I'm wrong here. But where Judas, they're asking, well, which one of us is going to betray you? Like the person who dips their bread into this, I always say bean dip with the kids just to kind of make it fun. But like, I couldn't imagine, like, so my wife was like, what if Judas didn't hear him say that? And he was just like, Jesus makes the statement, whoever dips into their chip into this, this dip, right? And then he comes in just hungry, like, all right, man. He dips his chip in and looking around at the rest of the disciples, like, what? What's the problem? Like, walk me through that. Is there no text, no like lost text from Judas, or was it just the unanimous? We don't want to hear from that guy.
Oh, that's a good question. So there is something called the Gospel of Judas, but it's not
Hmm.
written by Judas.
Ah,
It's a Gnostic document that comes out maybe in the late second century, and it it pretends that Judas was really like the the
the savior, the hero of the
the
story.
favorite disciple. Yeah, like he was the real hero because Jesus told him secrets about what was really going on and not the
Yeah,
other disciples. But Jesus had to make it look like he did something really bad.
yeah,
So like framed himself in some way. The real story is no. The Gospel of Judas is not written by Judas.
Right.
Um, I mean, the best we have is more piecing together from what we know of the politics and
Hmm.
society and culture back then. I think that Judas just wanted to um, try to force Jesus's hand to lead a military revolution. I mean, that's probably the best guess we
Ooh.
have,
Okay.
right? And so it wasn't so much that he had no love for Jesus or no love for the other disciples.
Hmm.
It's just that he thought that this was how it was going to play out. That Jesus was a military Messiah, that he would one day like liberate Jerusalem from the Romans and just kick
Hmm.
people's butts. So he wanted to make sure that that happened and make a little extra on the side. So
Yeah.
I think that's the most reasonable uh
Yeah.
yeah thing.
No, that fits. That makes sense. It's not as fun as like, guy at a party is kind of loud and I didn't know. I just was hungry. I didn't mean to dip it in here and then lead to betraying Christ. No, but okay. So even with some of the writings, am I accurate in my reading? Was Judas also known to have like used the money as he saw fit? Like, so basically, it sounds like they're accusing him of stealing from the purse. You
Yeah,
know?
that's in John 12. So
Okay.
yeah, according to John 12, he kind of took stuff from the top
Yeah.
and then pretended that he was giving it to the poor. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on with that fella. Okay. Yeah. Man, I was always fascinated by that story, especially when it's like, hey, we'll pay you this money to show us which
Right.
one he is.
Oh,
He
right.
makes the betrayal with the kiss. And then, like this scene, like I always see it in my head. It's like, huh, I didn't mean to do this. Here, take the money. It's like, ugh, we don't want that blood money. He's like, you gave it to me in the first place. Nope. We don't.
Right.
Him just like hurling the money, like, just get it like hot potato. But like,
Yeah.
oh, that's a lot. Okay, let's go back to more recent stuff. I don't know how well because we're at the end of the show here. This may
Yeah.
be a tease for next time. See what I did there, audience? Uh, the situation that's happening in Jerusalem to date. It's a
In
tricky
Gaza and
situation.
the state of Israel.
The Gaza Strip with Hamas and its occupation of Gaza and Israel, and did they fire the missile? Did they not? Why are they blockading aid? Um, just how do we look at the Bible and find some sort of order to that chaos?
Wow. That's a big question. So I'm going to start with this my simple response and then
Uh-huh.
kind of work back into the more uh complicated response.
Love it.
And because I want people to feel confident that when they raise questions that they're it can cut across Christians who have all kinds of beliefs about what's called the end times. And so,
Hmm.
I've seen in the US a lot of posts on Facebook and other social media from people who give this kind of timeline of like things that happened in biblical history and more recent history with the state of Israel. And then they give a map and the implication is like, well, the Palestinians have no right to the land. It's just it belongs to the Jews under the state of Israel. The uh, the thing that I raise is every time I see that, and I've done this maybe half dozen times, is I look at Ezekiel chapter 47, and I think this is like verses 21 to 23 or
Hmm.
thereabouts. And it basically says, well, in the end, God is going to restore Israel to the land, and they will also welcome foreigners and aliens, and those aliens will be co-heirs with Israel on the land.
Mm.
So that's a very and when I do that, I've gotten a few likes or whatever, but and some and like one person asked a genuine question about like, wow, that sounds like they should be able to coexist. And the thing is, yeah. And the reason why I start there is because whether you're Jewish and only recognize the Hebrew Bible, or you're Christian and
Mhm.
you recognize both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, like that's in your Bible. And
Right.
whether you're Zionist or not, at, at that point it's a little it's a secondary issue, right? Like this passage says, um, the the vision of the end is
Mhm.
that, or the the resolution to conflicts and stuff is that uh, Jews and Gentiles would be able to live on the land, and that the Israel at that time will welcome the foreigner, the alien, to do so.
Mhm.
So why aren't we doing that with the Palestinians? See, there is a I know maybe in other places, Europe and the UK, it's the assumptions are the opposite, where they wonder, do Jews, have a right to the land? Maybe it should go back to the Palestinians and stuff.
Mhm.
That's complicated too. Um, but this passage also speaks to that, because there is coexistence. So,
Right.
and and then we can start working out the details. But I would say let's start there, because the Zionism is an excuse. Like, your vision of the end then is, if you think only Jews should live on the land, then what do you
Mhm.
do with a passage like Ezekiel 47?
Right.
And so at that point, if you haven't made room for the Palestinians to be there,
Mhm.
and maybe there's going to be more, I don't know, but I mean, they're the people who are there right now,
Right.
then you're not actually being biblical. You're doing something else.
Phew.
So so I would start there, and from that point, it's really important to understand the recent history, over the last few decades, to understand,
Mhm.
on the one hand, it is really difficult to be Jewish, right, in the world today, especially
Absolutely.
in Europe. On the other hand, I mean, the Palestinians in Gaza over the last few decades have been, uh, an open air prison kindergarten, right? Because most people are children, and
Mhm.
Israel totally controls their water, electricity, and so on. And so,
Everything. Yeah. And they
you know,
say they basically give it for free. And I don't know how accurate that is. Like I know they charge or whatever, but like compared to other places, they're basically gifting that to them. But it
yeah,
always strikes me of like, who has the right to what,
right,
especially when most of this stuff was sort of taken through conquest,
right,
right? If you go back far enough, the history of Palestine, if I'm not mistaken, this is several years and several classes ago, right? But basically, before the Palestinians were there, it was Israel, but Israel. I don't know who. It depends how far you want to go back, right? Because as
right.
the Israelites are in Egypt, right, and this is after we have Joseph being the second greatest official, and then one generation later, the guy's like, yeah, I don't know who that is.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the Jews are being, they're we got to stop them before they become, too big, and then you have the whole Exodus story and all these things. Like, I don't know who occupied that territory before, but I feel like somebody did,
yeah,
and,
yeah,
God told them that, hey, this is the land I've promised you. And through conquest, like many other great nations, they occupied the land. Now, then the Romans came in later, right, and took over, and to sort of throw it in the Jewish community's face, they named it Palestine, in order to mock their faith.
yeah,
So it's like, how far do you want to go back as far as who has the right? And I think you're absolutely right when we're supposed, as far as looking at the Bible or the Quran, or even if you stick to the scrolls, right? It all comes down to, I feel like the Bible is very clear that, one, we don't force our religion on anybody. Two,
right,
we want to make sure that were able to live, and there are some times where it says to the Jew and the Gentile. Like you see a lot of that in the New Testament through Paul, where he's addressing them separately and then together, but it's still always an ideal of living together because every single one of y'all are God's children,
Right. Right.
and so I don't know. That's pretty good. We're going to have to invite you back. You've only opened more questions for me.
Well, Jeremy, I would love to come back, and just for the sake of our audience, I know,
Mhm.
the questions about abortion and the Bible, and especially the Bible. I mean, the early church is also very interesting, um, to
Mhm.
me and to probably a few people, but not to everybody. But the Bible really is important. And we're out of time now. I just want to say that there's 3 videos on my YouTube on the Anastasis Center's YouTube channel, called Abortion Policy. It Because we tried to set up a series of 3 a class with 3 sessions where we tried to distill some of the most important things from the book into the Dobbs era, right? So when in 2022, when the Dobbs decision was handed down by the Supreme Court, that really changed
Mhm.
things. Roe v. Wade was overturned, and so it's been an important time to talk about these things. And so I think many people probably do have questions. I would say look at Exodus 21 verses 22 to 25, and then jump in there with me and listen to the videos. They'll set a frame for how do we understand that.
All right, man. That is amazing. So there's the site for the YouTube channel. You can check them out right there. Make
Awesome.
sure to pick up this book, right? Abortion Policy and Christian Social Ethics in the United States. You can get that right here with that link. All of these will be in the comment section, as well as okay, here it is. You can go right here to get to this website. Um, all right, you ready for me? I'm gonna try it again. You ready?
Ready? You could do it.
The Agnosticis.
You got it.
Come on, man. The Agnosticis Center right there. I'm gonna stop saying it so I can quit it while I'm ahead. There is the link to that. And really just take some time to explore it. I mean, it is amazing. Any more books in your future, and what kind of subject matter are you looking to cover?
Yes, actually, one just came out. I contributed a chapter to a book called Reparations and the Theological Disciplines. And it was so my chapter is called "Don't Make Me Feel Guilty," and how penal
Oh man,
substitution actually hurts the efforts towards reconciliation and reparations. So there's that. Um,
one more
a-
time for the title.
Reparations and the Theological Disciplines. It is a textbook, though. It will, but check out my blog to see some of the background work that I did in order to write that chapter. Um,
Amazing, and that can be
it,
found on the website
yes,
right here, the Agnosticis Center. All
yeah,
right. And thank
and
you so
then
much.
oh,
Yeah.
can I say one more?
Oh,
Um,
please.
for this Advent, a friend of mine, Father Tim Clayton, and I are writing a book for Advent and Christmas using Irenaeus of Lyon, quotes from the most important second century Christian writer and possibly leader, right? So um, that should come out in late November.
Amazing. Sounds so good. Thank you very much. We enjoy having you on Urban Academia. Go ahead and tell the folks which podcast they should be checking out right here, right now. Go for it.
So check out Urban Academia. Uh, we had a great conversation over so many topics. And Jeremy, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to coming back and talking about Marvel's Black Panther and Tolkien's Lord of the Rings.
Oh, absolutely. Like that's a challenge right there. I am definitely gonna have to like reread the Lord of the Rings book series. The Hobbit I read in high school as part of our AP English course, but
Ooh.
yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I was like, after that, I was I was gone. I mean, I was already a sci-fi kid. I remember watching, I got my hand on the original Star Wars: A New Hope. And then I
Wow.
saw the number. I was like, number four? There are three more of these somewhere. I was like, oh, well, there are two more. But here's the thing about one through three, right? I had to wait
Right.
forever.
Right.
But yeah, so I was already a huge sci-fi fan. Like, so that just pushed me over the edge. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I even got into some the what is it? Oh man, my wife's gonna kill me. She just introduced me to an author. She's a black woman author. Um, the Tale of the Sower and the Tale of something else. Man, hold on. Listen, it's my show. I can stop. We can go a little bit over time. I have got to look this up. Let's see. Good old Google. The Tale of the Sower.
Yeah, I don't know. I've not heard of this.
Oh
This is great.
man. The parable. This is gonna drive me nuts. Wish you can see what I'm typing in to try to find this book. It is so ridiculous. Okay. Parable of the talents and of the sower. Octavia E. Butler. If he
Oh,
Yeah, so she did like I'm currently right now reading um oh my goodness. I am completely drawing a blank here. But yeah, it was the parable of the sower and the subsequent book, Parable of the Talents. And it's really good sci-fi. I mean, this lady who just like I don't get, grows up in the church. I don't get the God stuff, and then she basically creates her own religion. And
ooh.
it's a lot of plagiarism going on. Spoiler alert, right? But she takes a lot of some of the best parts of the Bible and creates her own religion, and it's one that's melded with science. And I mean, it is a wild ride. Of course, some post-apocalyptic United States, but the things that she was talking about back in the 70s, and the lure of her is she's 8, 9 years old. She's sitting in a movie theater, up in the colors only section. And after the movie is over, she looks at her aunt and was like, I could write that. And then that was the start of her writing career. And she just
Wow.
wrote and wrote and wrote, and to escape her reality. I mean, it's really good.
Wow.
Octavia E. Butler. I can't believe I forgot that. Man, sorry, wife. But thank you so much for being on. I'm going to put you in the back room, in the green room. Please do not log out just yet. I'm just going to wrap things up with the audience. Again, you can find Mr. Mako Nagasawa's book, Abortion Policy and Christian Social Ethics in the United States. I want to thank him so much for stopping by. And hey, we got that verbal contract. He's coming back. Get your questions ready, you token fans and Black Panther and Marvel fans out there. Hope you enjoying Loki. Um, Great conversation. If my other partner Chulo Rich was here, like he would have been all over these questions because we often have long conversations about how do we meld science with politics with religion, and I'm a firm believer of working first with religion and then letting that kind of guide the rest. And even for the unbeliever, like there's still so much wisdom and hope in the words of the Bible that I hope that they still explore it, like maybe explore it as an academic. But I love his idea of we need someone who's willing to sacrifice or willing to lose, or I'll put lose in quotations there, um, to tell the truth, right? Uh, Label your goals. I want to explore this the next time Mr. Nagasawa is on about really trying to understand. Hey, let's pause this, back and forth for a bit, and you tell me what are your goals. Like, what are you actually trying to get out? You say, I hear you. You say you're pro life. What does that mean to you? What are your goals? What would you like to see happen? How can we tangibly achieve this? These are some of the things that we have to start asking each other. And with patience, with grace. We like to say on the show all the time, everybody's a little bit right, everybody's a little bit wrong. Each of us has something of value to share. And how can we take all that collective pain and experience and leave the pain behind and extract the wisdom? But hey, common sense ain't coming, but we're going to still keep fighting the good fight. Join us next week. Thanks. For you.